The BTK Killer has spent nearly 20 years behind bars, so what's prison life like for him? From watching Spanish TV to playing chess through the mail, here's how the notorious serial killer spends his days. It's pretty normal for inmates in state and federal prisons to be transferred to other facilities, and according to the Center for Public Integrity, prisoners can be moved for a variety of reasons, including compassionate reasons, like moving closer to family or to receive specialized medical treatment. However, Dennis Rader is actually a little bit unique. He walked into El Dorado Correctional Facility in 2005 and hasn't left. According to NBC, the Kansas facility wasn't always guaranteed to be his last stop. On intake, he went through a screening process to determine whether or not El Dorado was the best place for him. But according to Warden Ray Roberts, they had one concern. Roberts told NBC, "Public safety is our primary mission." When he was first transferred into prison, his day-to-day life was pretty straightforward. Rader was almost exclusively confined to an 8x10 cell and wasn't allowed much contact with anyone. Additionally, his meals were passed through the cell door, reading materials were highly restricted, and he wasn't allowed a television. When Dennis Rader was initially sentenced, the judge took into account the prosecution's recommendations, which were particularly concerned about allowing him to relive fantasies. Apparently, Rader had previously been doing this via photos of himself and the victims. The judge ruled that as part of his sentence, it was forbidden for him to possess images of humans or animals, even if they were drawings. Just a year into his sentence, though, things had changed. Rader had apparently been a model prisoner. So much so that initial restrictions were lifted in a major way. That included restrictions on drawing, which became just one of the perks he was allowed as a reward for good behavior. Rader was also given permission to have a television and a radio in his cell, and giving greater access to reading materials. The move was widely condemned by the prosecution team that had worked on the case, and the families of his victims. Rader's defense team suggested that allowing him these basic perks was simply a matter of humane treatment, adding that complete isolation could be more damaging in the long run. In a series of letters written in 2012 and obtained by TMZ, Dennis Rader outlined his daily routine, saying that his day started with a 5 a.m. breakfast, followed by some cleaning. After that, he wrote that he would spend some time updating his logs and journals, and revealed that he recorded things like sunrise and moonrise times, daily temperatures, and various other natural phenomena. After a 9 a.m. break, he would go on to letter and poetry writing. Then it was time for exercise. He wrote that he tried to get in at least 2,000 steps per day, along with 120 push-ups, a routine that led into reading or studying chess up until it was time for lunch. Then he'd spend some time watching Spanish television in an attempt to learn the language, before taking a nap. Dinner was between 4:30 and 5, followed by watching the news on TV and updating his journals. Lights out happened somewhere around midnight. In letters written in 2012, Dennis Rader responded to earlier questions about what sort of thoughts occupy most of his time in prison. He wrote, "Probably my family. Miss them dearly. Not a minute goes by each day that I'm not thinking of them." Rader's daughter, Carrie Rawson, has said that she knows her father thinks of her regularly. She has letters from him that never stopped coming. From their initial back and forth to a period of years where he continued to write to her. She explained to ABC,
"I wasn't corresponding with BTK. I'm never corresponding with BTK. I'm talking to my father."
The content in the letters varies. In some, Rader apologized for ruining holidays for their family. In others, he asked her to publish a book of his artwork. With the 2019 release of her own memoir, Rawson told Esquire, "He still doesn't understand why my family hasn't visited or called, or why we aren't more just like the way we were. Early on, I felt like I would get to a point where I would be able to let him back more into my life, but it hasn't."
I'd do anything to not be the daughter of a serial killer, but I am.
In his letters from 2012, Rader wrote about his hobbies, which included keeping track of Wall Street stocks, as well as the prices of silver and gold. In addition, he also ran what he called a fantasy business, which involved rentals and land management. Rader also talks about studying chess in his letters, and revealed that he had several chess-by-mail games going with various people he was corresponding with. In one letter, he also wrote a bit about his taste in fiction, saying that he was in the middle of reading Stieg Larsson's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. In 2012, Dennis Rader wrote a letter saying that he'd gotten a rare trip outside on the way to visit the dentist. He described it by writing, "A kaleidoscope of colors, sky, fresh air, sun rays, sounds, birds, natures, flowers, inmates' garden. Enjoy each minute. Those that are out each day take so much for granted." He He went on to ask the recipient of the letter if they lived in an apartment and whether or not they had a place to do some gardening outside, asking, "If you live where you can grow outdoor plants, grow a sunflower for me, our state flower. This fall, the birds will love you for the seeds." In another letter, he shared one of the things he missed the most about being outdoors, grilling steaks, and told the recipient that the summer solstice was coming up. He instructed them to pick a building and note the position of the sun, then return on the same day in the following year to see if it was the same. In 2014, it was announced that Dennis Rader was cooperating with Dr. Catherine Ramsland to write a book about his murders. In a letter, Rader stressed that he wasn't going to profit, saying, "People like me need to be understood, so the criminal professional field can better understand the criminal mind." That book was Confessions of a Serial Killer, and Ramsland later spoke with Rolling Stone to detail some of the things she'd learned and how they had spent their 6 years of communication. Ramsland said that although they spoke through letters and over the phone, it wasn't straightforward at all. She said he had created what he called a codex, which was a 14-page packet of seemingly miscellaneous documents marked with a series of clues she had to decode. She told Rolling Stone, "This collection of writings and clippings offered a glimpse into Rader's mind. It was his way of retaining control, playing word games with curious guards and feeling as if he were still important enough to hide his secrets."
The fact that I was willing to play the game helped him to trust me.
Life behind bars isn't as isolated from the outside as it might seem, and in a 2012 letter, Dennis Rader wrote about some of the current events that he'd been keeping up on. One of the things he commented on was Facebook stocks hitting Wall Street. He also mentioned the Occupy Wall Street movement in one of his letters. Rader included notes on world events in his journals, and wrote that a part of his daily schedule included watching shows like PBS World News. In 2019, Dennis Rader reached out to the Daily Mail in a 5-page letter that revealed some fascinating things about his life in the El Dorado Correctional Facility. He started out by saying that the colorful half-circle drawing at the top of the letter, divided into sections and labeled El Caverna, was a reference to his jail cell. Rader added that he had people who kept in touch with him on a regular basis, and that he was particularly fond of the close friends who sent letters and bought him books. He wrote to the outlet, "I call them my cave family. Been here 13 years and 190 days as I write. After a while, you just get tired of the same thing day after day. But keeping busy helps, also changing one's routine." Not all interaction with the outside was good, though, and Rader added that he also kept track of people he called vipers. These people, he wrote, were the ones who struck up a pseudo-friendship in hopes of getting memorabilia, which they then put up for sale. He wrote, "Vipers are people that make money off inmates getting their letters, art, poetry, and things they give to them. I have now about 42 of them listed, but as I age, downsize, there will be more viper activity. They couldn't wait until I pass away." In his 2019 correspondence to the Daily Mail, Rader claimed that if he hadn't been caught, he had one more kill planned. He called her a retirement victim and said that she would have been his 11th. However, there's a theory that's not the case at all. According to Dr. Catherine Ramsland, her years-long correspondence with Rader left her thinking there was a precedent for him not telling the truth. Fast forward to 2023. On little more than a hunch and some curiosity that was kickstarted by the realization that BTK's hunting ground wasn't far from his own territory, Oklahoma Sheriff Eddie Verdon arranged a 3-hour interview with Dennis Rader. One thing in particular stuck out, and that was Rader's admission that one of the fantasies he had never fulfilled was killing a girl he kidnapped from a laundromat. It was such a specific thing that Verdon was able to tentatively link him to 2 more cold cases, including the disappearance and murder of a 16-year-old girl named Cynthia Kinney. Kinney disappeared from a laundromat, and the theory was deemed to have enough credibility that his property was searched again in hopes of turning up new evidence. Rader denied he was involved, and said that although he enjoyed meeting with the officers, he wasn't thrilled that his cell was searched. He told KZRG, "Everything that I had wrote on or kept was gone." Later that day, one box was returned with no reason why. When Carrie Rawson spoke with the Detroit News in 2019, she was still trying to come to terms with how the man who had been her loving father was also one of the nation's most infamous serial killers. In one recent letter he'd sent her, Rader told her that he was pretty certain he had a stroke. When he wrote to the Daily Mail that same year, he outlined a slew of health problems, saying, "I have scoliosis really bad. In the evening it tightens up, and I can't get around, do exercise, mainly in the arms after bed rest, but can't stay on my feet very long." He also wrote about changes in his handwriting and problems with his short-term memory, again referencing his belief that he had suffered from a stroke. In 2023, Rawson went to see her father in prison for the first time in 18 years. She told News Nation that it wasn't an easy meeting. Rawson said her father didn't recognize her at first, adding,
He's lost like 7 inches And he's in a wheelchair. He's pretty much rotting like to his core.
Rawson also said that her father didn't want to transfer. She told News Nation he wants to live his life out at the prison that he's at.